Welcome to everybody who's here. The first item on the agenda is approval of our last committee meeting minutes from April 27th, 2023. If I could have a motion and a second to consider that. Properly moved and seconded. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? Then let's go ahead and vote. The resolution passes. Next item on the agenda is a resolution authorizing a modification in contractual authorization for procurement of IBM Storage Insights Pro license, RFPP P49133. Mr. Kirk Talbot, welcome to the lectern.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman Durrett, Mr. Greenwood, Mr. Shreenath, members of the Business Management Committee. Next slide, please. This morning, seeking authorization to extend an existing contract that we have with IBM for an additional 3 years in the amount of $247,000 to continue to utilize the IBM Insight Pro software. This is the software that lets us manage the network hard drive, all the storage that we come back and ask for, expansion for CCTV, emails, legal documents, whatnot. By extending this contract for an additional 3 years, it will allow us to best utilize that storage, make sure that we defrag space, look at the health of the hard drives and whatnot. Next slide, please. Originally, it was a 2-year contract, and as we're continuing to utilize the underlying IBM hardware, this is a sole source, so the Office of Diversity and Inclusion did not assign a DBE goal because IBM is the sole provider of this software to manage the IBM hard drive. So the request this morning is an extension of 3 years on this contract and an addition of $247,242.45 in authorization.
Sorry. If I could get a motion and a second to put this on the table. Properly moved and seconded. Any questions or comments for Kirk? Mayor?
How do you determine if this is a fair price?
That is an excellent question. The Department of Audit goes through and takes a look to make sure that other vendors are charging about the same amount for the same type of tool, if that makes sense. We also look historically at what was the rate we originally paid for it, and are the renewals consistent? Other than that, you would probably, I'd have to come back with a more detailed analysis.
Is this something MARTA could do itself if it wanted to?
No, sir. This is software that IBM has created to be able to manage the storage system that they've provided to us.
So we're just kind of at their mercy, and is that fair to say or not?
We do not have other options in terms of a tool to manage this equipment, but it does derive a lot of benefit for MARTA. If we did not have this tool, we would have to blindly expand storage. We wouldn't be able to utilize it as efficiently as possible.
Okay, I don't think I understand that, but it's not important that I do, so thank you.
I just want to know who the salesperson is that gets the commission for doing no work. Kidding. Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, let's go ahead and vote. The resolution passes. Good for you, Kirk.
Thank you, sir.
The next item on the agenda is a resolution authorizing the award of a single source contract for digital signage data enhancement, RFPP P50232. Again, Kirk.
Thank you, sir. Members of the committee, next slide, please. This is a request to enter into a single source contract with B&C Corporation to support and maintain the software that drives all of our digital displays throughout MARTA. So when you think of the rail station, the signs that display next train, notifications, whatnot, that's what this software is. For those that may not be familiar with the history of it, we entered into a contract, a competitive contract. We call it the AVIS system that provides all the audiovisual systems. We entered into a competitive contract and we implemented the new signage in December of 2021. So the system went live. Kiewit was the original implementer. They were the company that won the contract, the prime, and BNC was a sub to them that provided the digital pieces. Kiewit put up all the signs and the conduit, whatnot. For the first 3 years, Kiewit was providing maintenance and support, but since we've entered into a term with SRTA, it was a 10-year contract, a 10-year investment. We're looking to have support and maintenance on the equipment and the signage for the next 7 years, or the last 7 years of that 10-year contract. So what this is seeking is to enter into a contract directly with BNC, who was a sub, to provide support for that system that they have supplied. Next slide, please. The request details are specifically a 7-year contract with BNC. In addition to maintaining and supporting, we've identified a few enhancements that we would like to make to the content of the sign, some additional information that was not originally required when we implemented it, and BNC are the single company that's able to provide that. As the sole provider of this software, Diversity and Inclusion has not set a DBE goal on this. Next slide, please. Costing, you'll see at the bottom of the table the annual cost to support and maintain the sign system. Year one, the $128,000 that we're requesting authorization for specific enhancements that are coming out of the capital budget to improve the sign content. So the request again is to enter into a 7-year contract with BNC, the sole provider of this software, for an amount of $1,312,289.11.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion and a second to put this on the table. Okay, it is on the table for discussion. Any questions or comments? Hey, Rod.
Yeah, have just a couple of comments, well, questions. So what happens at the end of this contract? Is there someone else that can provide this service other than this particular vendor?
No, sir. Since BNC manufactured, created the software that runs the signs, they're the only ones that are able to operate it. So at the end of the 7-year contract, we will be evaluating, do we continue to utilize this system or would we be looking to replace it? So if we replaced it, we would go out and do a competitive search, and whoever won that search would be able to provide. But no other company is able to support and maintain this software.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I've got a comment. I'm glad to see the enhancements that are going to be in there because, you know, for those of us that use the system, it's frustrating when you are looking up to see when your next train is coming and it's just got the same thing written up there and it's going in the opposite direction of where you want to go. And it's like, when is my train going to get here? And then sometimes you'll see information up there and you don't even know what it means. It's like rail car or train numbers or something like that, which means something to those that work the system, but not to the customer. So I would hope that we would be working with the vendor to really make sure that we're putting information up there that benefits the customer as they're waiting on the platform. So just my comment.
Certainly, sir.
All right, hello, how are you?
Hi, how are you? I have a question. Even though there is not an assigned DBE goal, do we know what the company looks like? Do we know what the makeup of the company is?
I would have to work with Paula to pull back the specific numbers. I'm not aware myself of what that configuration is. But we have a relationship with that company. We've been working with them, so that information is something that we can certainly share.
I would like to know that information, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right, let's go ahead and vote. For whom are we waiting? Maybe we're waiting for my screen to... Okay, the resolution passes. Kirk, thank you very much. At this time, we're going to be getting a briefing, hopefully our final briefing for the fiscal year 2024 operating and capital budgets from Mr. Greg Patterson, Senior Director of Grants and Budget. Greg, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Durrett, Vice Chair Williamson, Mr. Greenwood, Mr. Srinath, and members of the Business Management Committee. It's my pleasure to give you the briefing on our operating and capital budgets. Now, we have a couple of new slides in here, so I'll spend a little more time on those. On the ones that you've seen, I'll hit some of the highlights on it, not spend as much time, but if there are any questions that you'd like me to follow up on, I'm happy to do so. Next slide, please. So again, governing the budget development was the 4 strategic priorities of MARTA as seen on this slide. Next slide, please. As we near the end of fiscal year 23, it's a great time to mention some of the successes we've had from the current fiscal year. So we did cover this in the retreat, but I think it'd be great to reiterate the success of increasing our bus operators. So one of the problems we've had is the bus operator shortage. To being able to deliver the pre-pandemic service, we have certainly improved in that area. And so as we continue to drive towards that goal, we're going to continue to keep those bus operators at a high rate of fill. So that's, I think, a big one on our operational side of the house. We also, of course, launched the Breeze Mobile 2.0 app to help improve the way we handle our fare products. On the financial side, we're a lot stronger. We were able to obtain AAA bond ratings from bond rating agencies S&P and Kroll. We managed to save around $15 million in debt service from innovative refinancing. And we did manage to secure $63 million in competitive federal funding. Next slide, please. MARTA's also been safe and secure. We've been able to improve safety with a 17% reduction in Part 1 crime, reduced operator assaults, and passing our GDOT triennial safety audit with no major concerns. And it's also worth noting that the opening of 2 soccer stations and an expansion of markets in DeKalb and Clayton County have helped us build stronger connections within our communities. Next slide, please. Okay, I won't spend too much time on this slide, but I think the big takeaways here when it came to the budget premise is that we're going to strive our best to achieve pre-pandemic levels of service and continue to deliver our commitments on the capital program. Next slide, please. So this is one I'll spend a little bit more time on. So when it comes to delivering on our priorities at MARTA, the 24 budget is, right off the top, focused on supporting MARTA employees. So 65% of our operating budget covers direct support to employees between salaries, wages, benefits, and overtime. Included in those benefits is a 6% match for non-represented employees' defined contribution plans and an 8.09% contribution to the union pension fund. We're also spending approximately $200,000 for training and leadership development in this budget so that our team is ready to tackle the challenges of the years ahead. We also budgeted $1.2 million for commercial driver's license training to support the rapid deployment of the new bus operators. So it's one thing to hire them, it's another to train them up for the role, and we're making sure that we can get that completed and get that full service going. And then lastly, I'll mention that MARTA does provide healthcare coverage, so the employee share is limited to 17% for represented and 25% for non-represented employees. Next slide, please. When it comes to delivering on our customer experience, this budget will focus on the MARTA brand by the efforts you see here. Just a few key points that I'd like to point out on this slide would be the $7.4 million for targeted station cleaning. And you'll see that theme a few times in the presentation, but it's something we definitely want to highlight, that we're focusing on keeping our stations clean and have a pleasant experience for our customers. We also have $51.5 million for station rehabilitation and $5 million for deployment of smart restrooms. Next slide, please. MARTA is also focused on delivering the capital program, from state of good repair to the more MARTA expansion projects. I won't go through the whole list, but I'd like to call out some of the big key ones: our 5 Points Transformation Project, the new CQ 400 rail cars, and the Clifton Corridor and Summerhill BRTs, as well as the Clayton Multipurpose O&M Facility. These are some exciting projects to follow in fiscal year 2024. Next slide, please. I think we can skip over the agenda slide. Next slide, please. Okay, so on the budget timeline, I think the big takeaway here is we've completed the first 3 steps in the timeline process. We've had our board retreat briefing, we had our public hearings, received feedback. I'll share a little bit more towards the end of the presentation about what was contained in that feedback. And we've managed to provide our budgets to each of the jurisdictions. So now's the briefing on the budget presentation, and then our vote to adopt the budget will be on June 8th. Next slide, please. So as a refresher, our operating budget assumptions do include the pre-pandemic levels of service. Our fare revenues are forecasted at 23% above our fiscal year 23 budget, which is close to 2/3 of our pre-COVID revenue. The budget does assume a 6% across-the-board vacancy rate. We're currently operating slightly higher than that, but that's what the budget assumes, is a 6% across the board. It also reduces positions by 9 below the 23 budget. And it also assumes that the American Rescue Plan Act funding that was supporting operations will be drawn down by June 30th and not available in 24. Next slide, please. When it comes to our capital budgeting assumptions, what we were focusing first on making sure that the projects ended up in the year's list as anything that has either under contract or is in a late stage of procurement and we'll have a contractual obligation soon. It also covers any purchases we need to support our service with bus and rail fleets. And it places a focus on capital expansion projects that we've made commitments to support. When it comes to the state of good repair, our prioritization includes safety and security first and foremost, followed by critical operations, service enhancements, and KPI-driven outcomes. Next slide, please. From a budget risk standpoint, the budget could be impacted by the continued tight labor market, supply chain scarcities, any price adjustments we continue to see from inflationary pressures, and it's also still dependent on sales taxes coming in at the forecast and continuing to follow our positive ridership growth. Next slide, please. All right, moving on to the operating budget breakdown. Next slide. I know one of the requests we had at the retreat was to include the 2023 forecasted levels of service, where we expect to be at the end of the year in comparison to the 24 planned service. So you can see that now on the slide. It's got highlighted in that blue box second from the right. We, for 24, as you've heard me mention, we're targeting the pre-pandemic levels of service. 2019 is what we were trying to mimic because that was the last year we had full service levels. We also attempted that in 23, but the forecast shows you we fell a little short of that, particularly in bus and rail. That's really directly due to the operator shortages that we experienced. So with the recent hires and training, we're optimistic we can work our way back to the pre-pandemic service during the fiscal year 2024 budget year. Next slide, please. As I mentioned in the assumptions, the fiscal year 24 proposed budget reflects a reduction of 9 positions below the 23 adopted budget. It does also include transfers from the Division of Administration to General Manager to support customer experience on forward-facing IT products, and from Chief of Staff to Capital Programs to support property acquisition for the capital program and continued transit-oriented development opportunities. Next slide, please. I think the takeaway on this slide is that we have a balanced operating budget for fiscal year 2024, and it's a great position to be in given the sunset of about $140 million worth of American Rescue Plan Act funding that's not available in 2024 since it's fully consumed in 2023. Next slide, please. Okay, so going into the revenue side, next slide. For operating revenue, sales tax represents 50% of the total sales tax forecast, so that comes to $347.6 million. It also includes $81.5 million in federal support for preventive maintenance, $83 million for passenger revenues based on the improved ridership forecast, and positive growth in interest income due to high interest rates and a larger cash balance. The revenue is also assuming $48 million in operating carry forward, which is a portion of the operating surplus we're forecasting to have by the end of fiscal year 2023. Next slide, please. From a distribution standpoint, the majority of our fiscal year 2024 operating revenue does come from sales tax, followed by passenger revenue and federal support. If we add ad valorem to the sales taxes, we get 60% of our revenues from tax sources. Next slide. Okay, I'll step into our operating expenses next. Next slide. As a reminder, we forecast our total expenses to increase by 7.5% over the fiscal year 23 budget. The fringe rate increased by $11 million due to rising healthcare costs and anticipated increases in pension. Workers' comp expenses were also increased to align with our actuarial estimates and the fiscal year 2023 payout levels. We did have overtime budgeted at $5.4 million. That's over the 23 budget, and that's to account for providing service while our new operators are training up. We're also maintaining our contingency at $10 million, which is the same as fiscal year 2023. Contractual services expenses are slightly higher than the 2023 levels. That's mainly due to a combination of the targeted station cleaning contracts and increased demand for mobility services. There's also a little bit in there for parts and equipment that were delayed in fiscal year 2023 due to supply chain shortages that have to instead be purchased in 2024. Next slide, please. Looking at a breakdown of the expenses by type, the majority of MARTA's operating expenses are driven by labor. So if you add salaries and wages to overtime, that accounts for over 2/3 of MARTA's operating budget, which is consistent with transit providers across the country. Contractual services at 17% is including the contractual service for mobility. And fuel and propulsion, along with materials and supplies, support the fleet and delivery of service. Next slide, please. By division, our largest increase was in operations. This is driven largely by increase in salaries and wages planned to support MARTA labor. Targeted cleaning of stations and increased part purchases make up most of the remaining increase that you see there in operations. Police services under the general manager increased by $7.3 million. That's covering a 5% pay increase to officers and upgrades to police facilities and training expenses. And then lastly, most of the expense increase that you see in capital programs, expansion, and innovation was driven by the transfer of the positions from the Chief of Staff. Next slide, please. All right, moving on to the capital budget. Next slide, please. Just as a quick reminder, we do list our projects by FTA asset category. So this slide shows you how that separation breaks down from the type of work done in the capital program. And then we also separate it into the three big buckets of state of good repair, more MARTA City of Atlanta, and more MARTA Clayton County expansion. Next slide, please. So for fiscal year 2024, planned capital sources and uses, the capital plan assumes a total capital program of $855 million in expenses. It includes $456 million in planned expenses for state of good repair, $218 million for more MARTA City of Atlanta, and $29 million for more MARTA Clayton County expansion. It also includes $152 million in debt service payments specifically for the State of Good Repair program. Total sources of funds budgeted in 24 are slightly under $1.2 billion, with $541 million in fiscal year 23 carryover funds from all sources, and then $617 million in 24 generated funds. This includes a $125 million issuance of debt to support the State of Good Repair. And MARTA is expecting to carry forward $304 million of funds at the end of fiscal year 24 based on this budget. And I'll just note that on the debt issue, we do have that footnote there of the 125. That's if the capital program is executed as we plan, then we would draw down against our commercial paper facility. That's a type of short-term debt, and that's what we would use to balance the sources and uses of funds. Next slide, please. Okay, so breaking it out by those, the different buckets that we have coming in. For the State of Good Repair, it's $625.9 million sources by category. The largest contributor, of course, is sales tax. That accounts for 42% of funding. $150 million is actually included from the Unified Reserve. That's in the carry-forward balance, the prior year carry-forward balance you see there. And the budget also includes $84 million in federal grants. Next slide. On the uses side for State of Good Repair, the total budget, including debt service, is budgeted at $608 million. Breaking it down by asset category, the largest is for systems at $112 million, followed by non-asset at $110 million, and facilities and stations at $105.5 million. And we have some examples of those projects on the next slide. So next slide, please. So here's a snapshot of our top 10 State of Good Repair projects, which accounts for nearly 50% of the entire 2024 budget. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, you can see our commitment to delivering key capital program projects, such as the new CQ400 rail cars, station rehabilitation, and track renovation. Next slide, please. Here we have the top 10 projects for the MARTA City of Atlanta, which makes up 97% of the total program. Pause just a moment on that. Next slide. All right, so here's the new slide that explains a little bit more about the MARTA City of Atlanta. So I'll take a little time to walk through the contents on this one. The purpose of the slide is to explain the breakdown of operating capital budgets for the MARTA City of Atlanta with a comparison between the adopted 2023 budget and the proposed 2024 budget. It also includes a chart at the bottom to show the history of budget and actuals for enhanced bus service from fiscal years 2018 through 2024. Starting on the capital sources and uses on the top chart there, you can see that the carry forward balance, capital portion of the sales tax, federal funds, and interest budgeted for revenue all total up in the subtotal there. And then we also have what we budgeted for expenditures just below that in the uses section. So total sources budgeted for 2023 was $184.5 million, with uses budgeted at $45.4 million. Now, that was what we budgeted at the beginning of the fiscal year. That's not where things are bearing out from an actual standpoint. From that point of view, we actually received higher than expected sales tax revenue from what we forecasted and lower than expected capital spend. So as a result, when you take a look at the fiscal year 2024 proposed budget, you'll see the operating carry forward balance is higher. It's that 175.4. That's what we have for the carry forward balance. So if you add that to the capital sales tax, the federal funds, the interest income for the fiscal year 2024 proposed capital budget, the sources is $282.2 million with a $218 million spend. Now I want to tie that into the chart below, which talks about the breakdown of the division of sales taxes between operating and capital. So you can see that in 2023 we had 4 categories of spend: enhanced bus service, which was 32% of that year's budget, sustaining capital, which came in at 18%, streetcar operations at 9%, and capital expansion at 41%. One of the things we would typically do is split out in a sort of a 50-50 ratio, 50% operating, which was the enhanced bus service and sustaining capital, those add up to 50, and then the streetcar operations and capital expansion, which was a 50. It's worth noting, though, streetcar operations, what would happen is after we received our NTD data of the service delivered for streetcar, we would reimburse ourselves from the capital program into the operations to pay for what operations happen. Looking at that and deciding that going forward, we should probably put that operating expenditure in an operating split. The 2024 proposed budget includes the enhanced bus service, sustaining capital, and streetcar all as part of the operations portion of the split, and those totals add up to 45%, and then the capital expansions at 55%. What I would also like to tie out, so you can see it there, if you look at the capital expansion in the center chart, and then look up at the capital sales tax in the above chart, you can see those numbers tie out to each other. So that's the relationship. That's the capital portion going into the capital sources and uses. But if you want to get a full picture of the total costs and of both operations and capital, you would have to add in the enhanced bus service, the sustaining capital, and the streetcar operations, and that would give you the totals. And so that's the relationship between the total revenues from the sales tax of $97.3 million and how it splits out in that breakdown: enhanced bus service at 23% and 24%, sustaining capital at 15%, streetcar at 7%, and capital expansion at 55%. Now, part of the reason we're able to do that this budget year is taking a look down at the bottom chart, which shows the enhanced bus service over time. Now, this is from 2018 through our forecast for 2024, budget to actuals where the data is available. So you can see in the first 3 years, 18, 19, and 20, what we actually had was actuals exceeding our budgeted amounts. The service levels were higher. But then with the pandemic setting in, 2021, it dropped precipitously. As you can see, the actuals came down to 6.4 million. Then it rose a little bit in 2022 to 8 million. Now, I want to caveat here, the 2022 numbers are based on receiving final acceptance of our National Transit Database submission numbers. That hasn't happened yet. I'm hoping it actually happens before the end of the week, but that's just dependent upon final acceptance there. And the 2023 figure we have there in actuals is our forecast on what we think we're going to end the year at based on our current operating schedules. But as evidence from this chart, you can see that what we've actually been able to deliver, especially during 2023 due to operator shortages, We have not delivered as much in the actual service as what was budgeted. It gives us the leeway when we are examining our levels of service in enhanced bus service to go down to the 23% that you see in the 2024 proposed budget. So hopefully that gives a pretty good overview of the breakdown of the sales taxes, how they were used in the capital plan of the program, and how they're split for enhanced bus service, sustaining capital, and streetcar operations. Next slide, please. Okay. Now that we wrapped up More MARTA City of Atlanta, I just wanted to list out the top 5 projects we have in the More MARTA Clayton expansion, and these make up 91% of the total budget. Next slide, please. Okay, moving on to the results of our public hearings. Next slide. We did host 2 public hearings, one in DeKalb County and one at MARTA headquarters. For our DeKalb meeting, we had 11 attendees and 4 questions or comments. And for our hybrid MARTA headquarters meeting, we had 9 attendees in person, 44 on YouTube, and 3 on Zoom. And during the meeting, we received 3 comments or questions. Next slide. And this is a quick breakdown of the sort of responses we received to the public comments. There was a concern about the lack of transparency to accessing budget documents or information. We also received requests for more copies, more physical copies of the budget documents so participants can take copies home with them when they attend the public meetings. We also received requests that budget documents be prepared in larger print to assist individuals with visual impairments. We also received a concern that local jurisdictions may not be provided copies of the budget documents. We also received a comment that there was insufficient disclosure of information, and the concern was that the budget did not reflect all of the information that was shared to the public in the past. We also received a concern about levels of service, specifically asking the question about if we're going to eliminate any disabled or elderly bus access from specific bus routes. And the last comment we received dealt with just being able to advertise our meetings. Individual came in and asked questions why we don't advertise more in commercial advertisement. And so that covers the majority of our feedback. Next slide, please. This concludes my presentation of the 2024 proposed capital and operating budgets.
Thank you, Greg. Entertain questions and comments from the board, but let me start off, if you don't mind. So we've got darn close to a balanced budget in terms of operations. Very little room for, whatever might go wrong. And we are budgeting a 23% increase in fare revenue this year over last year. Some might say that's overly optimistic, given, the conditions that are out there in terms of office occupancy and commute traffic and the question about return to office, that sort of thing. That's an increase of $15.7 million in revenue. Have we any any kind of a sensitivity analysis to understand if we don't get that kind of ridership, what the offsetting cost savings might be, so that, we have some comfort that going with what we're projecting is the appropriate thing to do? Does that make sense?
I think it does. Mr. Srinath?
Yeah, Raj?
Mr. Chair, if I can comment on that. The numbers, rightfully what you quoted were from the slide, which compares 23 budget to 24 budget. However, 23 actual fare revenues are a lot higher than what we had budgeted. We believe, based on our year-to-date trend, the actual fare revenues are expected to be about 72 to 73 million. So the increase we have budgeted for 24 is not that great. I mean, it's a modest increase from 23 actuals.
So I guess, all right, that helps me. Actuals compared to actual 23 to budget 24. Okay, thank you very much. The second comment or question I've got in terms of capital, More MARTA, Clifton Corridor, we're showing in 2024 $45 million. And can you, maybe Carrie, give me a sense of what those funds will go to, given where we are in the planning for that project?
Sure. Good morning. Carrie Rocha, Interim Chief Capital Officer. With regard to Clifton Corridor, I don't want to get too specific in terms of the dollar amounts allocated for each because there is some money set aside for right-of-way acquisition there. So we want to make sure we're remaining competitive.
Right.
But that is to continue the conceptual design. It is to continue public outreach as we move forward with our LPA. It's to move forward on our 30% preliminary design and those sorts of activities. But there is an element of right-of-way acquisition that is in there.
Which would explain the
Why
size of
why it's
that.
higher. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chairworthy.
Going back to the public comments, I appreciate you being very transparent with the concerns the public raised. What are we doing to address them?
So I can speak a little bit, at least when it came to providing copies of the presentation. We've had a few requests for copies of the budget presentation. We've made those available for anyone to review and consume. We're certainly going to take under advisement creating larger print varieties in the future. Whether we haven't sat down and actually planned out exactly what we're going to do, whether it's going to be a separate budget book or just increase the font and sizes and stuff within the budget books we have. With the rest of the items we've received on public feedback, excuse me, go ahead.
Mr. Worthy, if I may just comment on that, specifically on one of the public comments about not enough information is available or transparency is not there. We have detailed budget on our website. It was available. So, I mean, what Greg showed was kind of almost verbatim, if you will, the comments we received. Not trying to say whether those were correct or not. But however, that information is available on the website, has always been available, and will continue to provide that.
Hi. Who was first?
Yeah, I just have a question and then a couple of comments. One of the comments that I heard at the public hearing was that, once again, it had to do with the availability of a hard copy of the budget. And I think if we have something like that here at headquarters so that those individuals that want to come and get a hard copy, they can. Because some people like to, they may not be connected. They're just not. Those that really watch MARTA and that track MARTA, they're not as connected as we would think they are, and I think a hard copy would serve them well. And these comments have come up before concerning having hard copies available for the public. My next comment has to do with, on slide 9, which has to do with the priorities of the capital projects. Yeah, can we go there? All right. That's before that, right before that. It has the capital projects priority, yes, right. I just want to emphasize the fact that we're getting ready to put quite a bit in this capital project as we talk about expanding MARTA. And I think as I talk to those that live in my community space, they always ask, well, when are going to see results in what MARTA is doing? And this just reflects that we're getting ready to spend resources to expand this transportation enterprise in a very real and tangible way. And I think it's important that the public can see what we do, and I hope that they can understand that we're being very specific and strategic in what we're doing, and that it's making a difference for them as riders. And I think this reflects those priorities, and I just want to emphasize that. I think it's important. And I have gotten a lot of comments about our station rehabilitation that is going on, because they can see how clean our stations are and how we're putting resources into all kinds of spaces to make it pleasant for our riders. And so I think that helps us a long way, but I'm glad to see that we're moving in that direction. So thank you.
Thank you for the comment.
Stacy?
Good morning, thank you. 2 quick questions for you. So in regards kind of to the public engagement, the low turnout, is that typical for budget hearings? And if
Actually, as I understand it, it was better than normal.
Really?
Yes, ma'am.
Wow.
I will state that in my experience when it comes to public hearings, in general for public entities, concerned citizens come out if they have a concern, but if people are generally satisfied, they don't come out as much. We did see a lot of attendance, though, as you saw on the YouTube portion of it. So, having an access in a remote fashion, I think, does increase the presence of attendees.
So with the YouTube attendants, are they allowed to ask questions in the comments or anything like that? Like, how are their questions or comments addressed?
So I cannot remember the exact format. I might have to turn to one of my cohorts in the room who can speak to it. But I know that we did receive, or have the ability to receive comments, and can address them both in email fashion. We can receive them that way, and I believe we can receive them in comment form as well.
Gotcha.
Stacy, I'll share that as part of the meeting, we very clearly articulate, here's how you can submit comments, and we give the whole menu of ways to do it, and I believe we do it pretty clearly. So the public who is participating does clearly understand there are different ways that they can provide comment, and if they're not ready that evening with a question or a comment, they have the ability to contact us with that.
Gotcha. I know there's always like seemingly a lot of negative responses when it's on YouTube and people aren't able to immediately type in their comments or things like that. So that was really what the question was around. And then, but thank you for the explanation, Jim. And then second question is, did we have any like direct concerns from our jurisdictional partners in regards to the budget and their projects?
I don't recall receiving any.
Okay. Okay.
So I guess I could piggyback off of what you just asked regarding direct concerns. I zeroed in on the 3.4 million and 200 plus new bus shelter amenities. I'd love to see a breakdown of which bus shelters are going to get upgraded in Clayton especially. That has been a pain point for our elected officials and residents alike. But I'm glad to see that there, and so hopefully we'll get some type of a breakdown or somebody can speak to that.
We can certainly provide that to you.
Yeah, I can just chime in on that. I know that we are committed to the 1,000 amenities program, and that there's the list of which amenities are being targeted is a subject that's vetted through the local jurisdictions. So that conversation has happened, so it'll be easy enough to get you a list of, where the next ones are. And it's largely based on ridership usage, how many boardings are happening per day, and things like that. So we'll get that for you.
Frida.
I had the pleasure of hosting the budget hearing, public hearings here at MARTA that night. And it was very clear how you could get on and how you could send your answers. And there's all these different options, and it makes it really clear. You can even mail it in if you want to, if you have no other options. So, and it was stated before it started, it was stated at the end again and reiterized. So I feel like that they had the opportunity to do that. And many of the comments that came out that night was from one individual who spent a considerable amount of time going over the budget. So there was one public comment that he had quite a bit to say. Thank you.
And Stacy, if you want to see attendance at a MARTA hearing, just wait till we change a bus route. Mayor Floyd.
Thank you. In there, I noticed a comment about the jurisdictional partners having a question. Have they actually received a hard copy of the budget?
That's my understanding. They all received a hard copy of the budget.
Is that a yes?
Excuse me.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Raj.
Can you please repeat the question?
Have our jurisdictional partners actually received a hard copy of the proposed budget?
I do not know about the hard copy, but electronic copy, yes. That's my understanding. Unless our chief of staff has something to add to that.
That's not accurate. I think Carrie's going to correct another misstatement that Greg made about not hearing from jurisdictions. We have heard from the City of Atlanta and the City of Atlanta. So all of the jurisdictions received the budget emailed to them. So not a hard copy, but emailed, with the exception of the city, because the city budget is still in discussion. That's why this is a briefing today and not a vote. So, and there are still, I think, adjustments to be made before this draft goes over to the city.
Yes, and I just want to correct this statement. We did get some initial comments from the mayor's office asking questions about the change this year for bus service and what we've budgeted for bus service, as well as the streetcar O&M previously being budgeted at the capital level, as Greg described, which is now on the operations side of the house. So we did get those questions. We did have a conversation with them, and we will go back and demonstrate to them through these clarification slides where those new budgeted amounts are.
Okay, one more, Melissa, one more clarification. The city of Atlanta has not actually received a budget, a hard copy?
They haven't gotten an email from us with the budget. They have seen it because they've responded to it. It was posted online, which is what the slide should have
Okay.
said, that it had been posted online. We shared that with them, and so it's been gone through in detail. They are aware of it. We're working through some issues and some
Okay,
concerns with
but-
them.
And that, you say that's being adjusted based on these discussions?
Yes.
Has what the other jurisdictions outside of the city, and when you say the city, I assume you're talking
City of
about
Atlanta.
Atlanta?
Yeah, sorry, Mayor.
Since there are a lot of other
Decatur
cities
City.
around, just to remind you
Sorry
of
about
that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But I assume the other jurisdictions, have they gotten the city of Atlanta part of the budget also? More
Yes,
MARTA?
everything that was, the budget as we presented it at the board retreat was posted online and shared with them.
Okay.
And the adjustments, there have been some adjustments today based on the feedback that we got from you guys at the retreat. There will be additional adjustments before June 8th, likely to the city of Atlanta piece. Clayton, there was no request for any adjustments from Clayton, DeKalb, or Fulton. In Fulton, the requests have been about clarity on the Georgia 400 spin and on the Roosevelt, which we're still also working through.
Okay, thank you.
And I think, if I could just say, I think, I think it might have been Russell who made the point at the board retreat that, the board votes on the overall top-line numbers. So in theory, you could have taken a vote today because the top-line numbers aren't likely to change. But to Jim's question earlier about, given where we are on the Clifton Corridor project, how do you explain that number? Well, that number also will likely not be what what it says there, but that's okay because the top line number is still there. But even so, we want to better reflect our partnership with the city in the sort of the breakdown of the numbers below the top lines.
Thank you. Regarding DeKalb County, has there been any discussions with DeKalb County jurisdiction elected officials concerning funding the Clifton Corridor line past Emory University?
Not recently. It's part of their larger county plan that they're still working through. But we have not talked to them about the connecting from Claremont to Avondale.
Okay, so
I mean, it.
I haven't either, so that's.
Yeah, I mean, they're all aware of that it's going to require additional sales tax money. And so that's sort of where that stands. And as a commission, we've had discussions with I think almost all of the commission members about the referendum, what they're thinking on that, and they have one of our consultants in Grady Smith, VHB, working through sort of that final project list. But that's really where it stands now.
Okay, so nothing definitive. And then, Carrie, the vote on the local preferred alternative for the Clifton Corridor, when is that vote, and will it go past Emory University and what we're asked to vote on?
The LPA on Clifton won't come to the board until we have an agreement with the city that they're 100% on board with it. So, we thought it might be ready to come to the board in May, then we thought it might be ready in June. I don't expect it will be. I think we'll be working on this, could be through the summer. The plan right now that Carrie's team has developed, yes, it comes through Emory, and then it goes, you can speak to that, that's your project.
And I'm much more concerned with the part past Emory, is my question's focusing on that, obviously.
Good morning, Mr. Floyd. Yes, so the route would take us from the city part, leaving at Clifton, and it would go and branch off, going to the VA and also going south, and then it would eventually go over to Avondale Station. But that's the part that we're talking about, right? That's not funded.
Right. Okay, and then I guess my question is the arterial, we were briefed the other day on this arterial rapid transit on Candler and up to, hopefully we're about to vote on a locally
Yes.
preferred offer.
So we have a
Comes into the
presentation.
Avondale station, and I guess my question is, where are we in the coordination of those efforts? Is there any discussion going on about that with DeKalb County or the city of Decatur or the city of Avondale Estates?
For Candler, for the ART for Candler?
For the, yeah, well, for the connection between the two, if you will. Is there,
So the connection would come for Clifton and Candler, the connection would be at the Avondale Station itself. The Clifton BRT
right,
going to Avondale, and then the Candler ART would also go to Avondale, and so that would be that's their connection. But in terms of funding, for Clifton, no, we haven't had any conversations in terms of moving forward with the ART for Candler. That's what you're going to vote on today, hopefully vote on today, and we'll continue that conversation as we further develop that project.
okay, and this arterial rapid transit, there's no money in this capital budget for that project, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Ms. Scott?
Thank you. Just to ask for also, we were briefed on the amount of expected bus shelters and amenities in DeKalb County. Do we have a list of the priorities and in what order it will be done in the timeline?
To defer to Shelley on that.
Good morning, Ms. Scott. For DeKalb County, we haven't prioritized, but what I'd say we looked at putting in the shelters first. So you saw a heavy presence of shelters. Then probably next you'll see a whole lot more benches, the semi-benches or the 2 seats. But I can provide you a list of all of the ones that we're going to be doing. And I also want to add that we supplement to that list based on like emergencies or requests that we get. So the initial list we'll add and subtract as we go along with the program.
So there is something you could send me.
Yes, I can send you, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Blakely?
Thanks, Jim. So my question is, so I asked specifically if there were any concerns from jurisdictional partners, and I was told no. Mayor Floyd asked if they had received hard copies, and he got the explanation to my question. So why is it when I asked the question, it was no, but he asked the question and we get a dialogue?
As soon
I'm
as you
sorry,
asked the
Stacy,
question
can
and
you
it was-
use your microphone? We can't hear you on this side. I'm sorry.
My
I don't know what you
microphone is
asked.
right here. Sorry.
As soon as you asked the question and it was answered incorrectly, I texted Kali, Raj, and Carrie to say that was wrong. It just so happened that Carrie responded back to me and said, should I correct? And I said, yes. By that time, they had moved on. So certainly from the staff side, there was no disrespect intended to you.
And let me offer my apologies.
Oh, no problem, but it's just very disturbing when I ask a question and it doesn't get answered. I mean, you could have stepped up and said when he was wrong, you could have stepped up and said, hey, Stacy or Director Blakely, let me make a correction, instead of allowing it to go forward. And so I would like, for going forward, if there is a mistake, just step up to the mic and say it. Like, why would you not immediately correct it and allow it to go on? That's all.
If I may, I want to apologize on my behalf as well as Greg's behalf. Greg probably was not aware of that. Yes, Melissa did text saying that that was incorrect, and she did correct it. In the interim, there was a question by Mr. Floyd on the same issue. So let me offer my apologies. It's not really Greg's fault. Greg perhaps was not aware of some of the discussions that were going on.
Anything else on this subject? Greg, thank you very much, and everybody else for that presentation. We have another briefing. Item 5 on the agenda is a briefing on the record-keeping services for non-represented 401A defined contribution plan and MARTA employee 457B deferred compensation plans, RFP P50348. Ms. Barrero, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Durrett. Good morning, Mr. Greenwood and members of the committee. Next slide, please. I will very briefly tell you about why we are soliciting a new record keeper for our defined benefits, defined contribution, and deferred compensation plan. I'll tell you what the overview of these plans are, and I will walk you very quickly through our intended request for proposals. Next slide, please. So the purpose of this presentation is to inform you about the fact that we have a contractual agreement with Nationwide, which is the record keeper for these plans, which is coming to an end. Because of that, we do intend to issue an RFP. The record keeper is charged with the consolidated management approach for the 401A non-represented defined contribution plan and the 457 deferred compensation plan. The board of directors delegated the oversight and management of these plans to the contributions, the defined contributions and deferred compensation plan committee. I am the chair of the committee, so I'm making this presentation on their behalf. Although MARTA makes contributions to these plans on behalf of the employees, and the services provided by the record keeper are not required or involve MARTA's funding, MARTA does provide support for management, does not provide support for management-related expenditures. Next slide, please. So,
hey, Luz,
yes,
excuse me. Should that first bullet say 401? No, that you are on the correct slide. Should that first bullet say 401A and the second bullet say 457? Because I think they've been accidentally switched.
Oh, you're correct.
Okay.
We will make that change. But the essential point being that the non-represented defined contribution plan summary here is that we have 3,612 participants. We have a total balance of $124,051,054, and the average account balance is $34,266. The 457 plan, good point there, has 1,501 participants. The total participant account balance is $62,644,158, and the average account balance is $41,703. The committee that oversees these plans is advised by the financial advisors and by the record keeper in order to make the decisions regarding the plan's investment funds. Next slide, please. So it is the intent of the committee to issue an RFP following the MARTA's procurement process to solicit a new record keeper, a service provider for these two plans. As I mentioned before, the MARTA Board of Directors delegated the management and oversight of these to this committee. The scope of work that will be included in this RFP includes record keeping and administration, investment advisory services, investment performance reports, custodial trustee services, members education, and members communication. And once this process concludes, it is our intent to come back to you and let you know what the outcomes of the solicitation were. And that concludes my report. I will entertain any questions. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any questions for Luz? Okay, seeing none. Luz, thank you for that presentation.
Thank you.
And I'll call your attention to fiscal year 23 April consolidated financial highlights and financial KPIs, which were provided in the materials for this meeting and there for your information only. Any other matters to come before this committee? Yes, sir.
Question about the fair gate stuff, the proposal for the fair gate. Can you give me where are we with that proposal now?
I'll ask Rod Allen to give you an update. You talked about the AFC automated fare collection, yeah.
Good morning. Proposals are now due June 22nd, 2023.
Okay. Thank you. And I apologize for not remembering that. You probably told me that half a dozen times.
No, that to be quite honest, that change just occurred on Monday, I believe. The proposals were due on May 25th, which is this coming Thursday. But of the last couple of weeks, we had a few vendors that, I think it was basically about 6 that asked for an extension to be able to provide a little bit more in depth and make sure that they had a great set of proposals to provide to us. And so taking that into account, we decided to extend the proposal deadline by 30 days to June 22nd.
Okay, so I'm not as dumb as I thought I was then.
No.
Thank you.
That does not take us too far offline. We're just tightening up some of the schedule of some of the internal work that MARTA staff would have to do. And so we still look forward to bringing something to you in late fall.
Thank you, Rhonda. Okay, then we will conclude this meeting, and the PCP committee is the next up.
Programs Committee meeting for May 25th, 2023. First item on the agenda is the approval of the April 27th, 2023 meeting minutes. Can I have a motion and second to approve the meeting minutes? It's been seconded and moved. Any questions or discussion? If none, please vote. And it has passed. Second item on the agenda today is resolution authorizing the award of the contract for procurement of architectural and engineering final design services for the Bankhead Station expansion, REI AE 50292. Presentation by Ms. Kelly Davis, Director of Facility Program Management. Ms. Davis.
Good morning, Chair Blakely, Mr. Greenwood, Ms. Rocha, other committee members, and the rest of the members of the board. Next slide, please. Back in January, we did come to the Planning and Capital Committee and asked about the solicitation, and we gave you a briefing to solicit forms for the infrastructure, architecture, and engineering final design services for the Bankhead Station expansion. On April 23rd, we did receive qualification statements from 4 firms. Our SEC, which is our Source Evaluation Committee, did meet independently, and we reviewed and scored to determine a short list of two firms. On last Friday, May 19th, oral interviews were conducted with the short list of the two firms. Next slide, please. The purpose. As a part of the MARTA program, Atlanta, the station platform systems will be expanded to accommodate a platform extension, and in coordination with adjacent TOD opportunities. We are looking for a procurement of professional architectural and engineering design services from a single firm or team to provide the final design bid documents for the construction of the Bankhead Station expansion. The specific expertise required during the term of this contract includes, but is not limited to, project management, architectural and engineering, facilities, system design services, safety certification support services, and public engagement support services. Next slide, please. The costs. The A&E services are estimated to be approximately $6 million. The term will be a term of 3 years with a 1-year base. In 2023 dollars, the total construction is approximately $48 million, and that's based upon our 30% design, and the total project cost is $72 million. In terms of schedule, right now we are looking to go to final design in late 2023. With that, we will do a final procurement for the construction in October 24 to February 25, actual construction February 25 to January 27, and we're looking to be open and operational on July 2027. Next slide, please. So the recommendation of the SEC is for the approval of a resolution authorizing the general manager, CEO, or his delegate to enter into a contract for the procurement of the final design services for the Bankhead Station expansion, REI AE 50292, with Axis Infrastructure LST. The Office of Diversity and Inclusion has assigned a 26% DBE goal on this procurement, and Axis has committed to the assigned goal on this project. If you look at Axis's team, everyone who is highlighted in italics, they are DBE firms. Next slide, please. So with that, I am now requesting approval of the resolution authorizing the award of a contract for the procurement of architectural and engineering design services for the Bankhead Station expansion, REI AE 50292. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Can I get a motion and a second to bring it to the floor for discussion? It has been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Mr. Durrett.
Yes. So would the budget then for these services be a total of $24 million?
The budget is $6 million for final design services.
Okay, so when I'm looking at, I think it's slide number 4, if you could go back 2 slides. Help me understand the difference between the $48 million construction and then a 50% on top of that for a total project cost of 72. That's 24 million difference.
Yes, sir.
6 of that would be for engineering and design, and the other 18 would be, hi, Carrie.
This one? Can you hear me? Okay. Yes, so the difference between the 48 million, the 48 is our anticipated construction value. Outside of that are any additional elements, say for professional services, legal services, procurement, in-house soft costs, as well as contingency. We've got a bucket of contingency on this one that might be slightly higher than others just because of the elements that we're dealing with, especially with the single crossover and the tail track elements.
Thank you. I was just a little confused because I saw it was for 3 years with a 4th year possible, and I was just doing the math. And
Yep, no, and certainly, you know, you're going to see our contracts. We've had to go back and extend these contracts because we want to make sure that the final designer is on board through construction, right? We need them to review submittals, to do design services during construction in case of changes. We're just being precautionary here. It just simply makes sense to have the design contract span the length of construction rather than coming back to the board to ask for extensions for something we know that this work is going to have to happen.
thank you.
No further questions?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, I still struggle with the timeline on this thing, and I feel I'll at least comment. It just seems to me that there's too much time here, and I think it's getting used to this, but a $48 million contract, 2 years to do that, and I understand that some of the reasoning behind that is that the way the work has to be done. You know, this thing has to be kept in order, it has to keep going and all that kind of stuff. But are we getting too comfortable with time? I mean, we're under the gun to get some of this stuff built and get it in place, and I don't want to get too comfortable in taking too long to do stuff rather than making an effort to get it done 6 months quicker. And I guess I'm asking for your thoughts.
Absolutely. So it's a great question. The construction duration here is estimated, right? We don't have a final design. So without a final design, we're simply going on our experience as well as making sure we have a contingency built in here that we're going to get it done by the date we've committed to the City of Atlanta under MARTA to get it done. So that construction schedule is part of the package that the final designer will put together. They will do what's called a contract time determination schedule, and we'll be locking the contractor down within this window of time. If it's narrower, we'll certainly make it narrower. But this is right now for estimate purposes with contingency, that is the duration that we've estimated right now. And you are correct. This is an operating station. We do need to keep it open and keep it fully accessible while we're doing the construction, especially with the track components here, as we're going to have to adding that single crossover in advance of the station, as well as the tail track behind. It will take a bit of coordination. So, you know, this is with contingency. We will have a more refined number that the final designer will put together that will write into our specs as we move forward.
Okay, thank you. In my experience in construction, what happens is you get a date to finish, and then the final design, instead of taking 9 months or a year, whatever it is, it takes a year and a half, and then, but the date out here to finish never changes, and the construction time keeps getting, the poor little contractor getting shoved into less time, and so then he gets something that's unrealistic. And I think if we don't, I mean, procurement, and I guess you're talking about procurement there of the construction part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, October to February, that's 4 months. And that I understand the need for it, and I think that, but it just seems to me it's too easy to get comfortable with giving too much time for this and not enough emphasis on getting some of this stuff built and online.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in a project like this, even a couple of months is a big deal, and getting it finished early. So I guess that's my comments.
Bill, I just want to add to that. I think some of the thinking behind the dates and the way we've set them is, in as much as we know it's important to go as quickly as we can, one of the other things we want to avoid is this idea that MARTA sets a schedule and then misses it. So we wanted to be very sure that what we've put here is something that we can absolutely deliver on, and to Carrie's point, there's enough contingency in there to make us comfortable. So that's just the other MARTA brand issue that we want to start to turn people's minds around, is if that's the date we said we're going to hit, we're going to get there or sooner.
I really love to see an aggressive schedule and then beat the schedule.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think that's, you talk about improving a brand name. And when you do something like that, that's what Carrie's doing her job then. That's when she's doing her job, is when something like that happens. And I know that's not easy to do.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of people that are impacting that rather than just you doing your job. So anyway, well, thanks.
Thanks, Bill.
Just following up on his question, and Russell had mentioned it before, do we ever consider any incentives for expedited schedules?
Yes, we do. It depends on the project, and sometimes this one is not. We do need to look very carefully. Typically on FTA projects, we're only able to apply liquidated damages, but there have been cases where we have been able to get federally funded projects to do some incentives. So we are looking on a project by project basis. And that's still a possibility here, right? Again, this is procurement of the design services, and we can certainly take a look at that as, the contract time determination will get set, the number of contract days and any intermediate milestones will get set. We can certainly look at that point in time at what liquidated damages there might be and what incentives we may want to pull in, and make sure that they're, if they're real incentives where we get real benefit, they're absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Any additional questions, discussion? No? Please vote.
Thank you.
Have we passed? And it has passed. Thank you, Ms. Davis. Third item on the agenda, resolution authorizing the award of a contract for professional services for the Clayton County South Lake BRT study, LOA L50339. Mr. Larry Prescott, Assistant General Manager of Infrastructure.
Morning, Madam Chair, Mr. Greenwood, Ms. Rocha, committee members, gallery. We're going to discuss today the Clayton County BRT, a feasibility engineering option that we're going to work on this planning program. Next slide, please. We're currently in the planning and preliminary design for the BRT for South Lake, basically coming from South Clayton, moving up around the west side of the airport with the goal of tapping in or ending at the College Park Station. While we're reviewing the alignments for this project, the idea came up, wouldn't it be nice if we couldn't just tap directly into the airport rather than bypass it and have to come back around? The discussions got a little bit more in depth and showed that we could possibly save up to 20 minutes in the rider time access to the airport. So we reached out to the GDOT and the airport and the Clayton County and asked them if they thought this was a good idea, and they are well behind us on this. They all have concurred with us that this is a good opportunity to look at. So looking at the option we're looking at, the upper right is kind of an inset, and the lower right is a rendering. The red is a ramp coming off 85, running up, going to an aerial structure, running parallel to the automatic people mover that's already there, running to the east, coming to a station connection over around the people mover and our station to have a direct access into it. Coming back, we'll come back to 85 and go back southbound on the other side. And while we're there, we're looking at the possibility of tapping into the Conrack and the other facilities over in that area. So that was the initial idea that we ran. So right now we're in the process of transitioning the general planning contracts for the fiscal year that are ending in June and then starting up in July. So this letter of agreement is to bring in a consultant to help us bridge that gap, get the legwork going so when the new GPC comes in, we can turn it over to them without a delay in time. So the capital programs reached out to 4 consultants in the area that have both GDOT, MARTA, and airport work, and we reviewed their proposals, and we pared it down and selected the most qualified consultant to serve our needs for this short duration. So next slide, please. So while we reviewed that, we came back with the recommendation for the Heath and Linebeck team. Heath and Linebeck has a good reputation with a long service for MARTA, GDOT, and the airport work. Contract term is just 2 months, again, to bridge that gap. They could do a lot of legwork reaching out to the stakeholders and do a feasibility for us. Cost is $275, and they've committed to a 16% DB participation, bringing Acura and COFRA to help assist that with the design and the data collection for this project. The next slide, please. With that, I'd like to request for approval of the resolution authorizing award of the contract professional service for Clayton County South Lake Bus Rapid Transit, letter of agreement L50339.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Larry. Can I get a motion in a second, please? It has been moved and seconded. Any questions? Mr. Frierson.
Yeah, so the DB participation is COFRA, I'm assuming that they are a minority company?
Yes, sir, an
Is that
engineering firm,
correct?
yes.
All right, so they are a part of this. So how would we know that they would reach this 16%? I say that they committed to it, but how would we know that happens? Is that diversity? Do they track that?
Yes, so again, they've had a long history with us working for MARTA, so they understand how our process procedures work and our reporting procedures. COFRA is an engineering firm, so they will be part of the engineering team. Acura is geotech and survey, so they will be doing a lot of data collection up front. So 2-month turnaround, there's a lot going on at the same time, and a lot of need. So Heath and Linebeck needs that extra support. So yes, they will report it once they finalize that.
Okay.
And-
We just want to make sure that they try to, in an effective way, achieve that goal. Because once again, we want to see the participation of everyone. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Durrett?
I just want to say I think this is brilliant, and I couldn't be more excited about this. Is there, I presume that when we get to figuring out the correct design, the engineering, and understand what the cost would be, that there would be a significant sharing of sources coming to this, even from the airport. And the second, and you can let me know if that is your expectation also. And the second thing is there any chance to get the airport to perhaps extend this, if it's feasible, to perhaps create a better connection between the domestic part of the airport and the international part? Because the current solution of getting back and forth is pretty pitiful,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yes. The first part, yes, we will try to, this will be a joint venture, so to speak, with all the associations. It'll definitely open up the federal funding, or external funding opportunities to make this work, because it works for everybody, not only for Clayton County, but also for South Fulton. So that opportunity will come up as we develop it further. So this is the study to make sure we get the information out front. As far as the connection with the airport, that's a separate subject altogether.
Yeah, and I'll just add on the money side of the equation, we have not had those conversations with the airport. You know, as noted, this project could really provide an opportunity to open up to projects in South Fulton, potentially for this connection, again, directly to our heavy rail system as well as to the airport. We haven't had the distinct cost conversations until we kind of know what's feasible. But the second part of that is we have already talked to some of our partners like the ATL to let them know that this feasibility study is moving forward. And this would be something that we would be interested in putting on a priority list for state funds. So we have given them that heads up. We're already thinking about how we could potentially fund it. We're looking at other ways to package it for CIG funds potentially, because you can have linked projects that might not happen at the exact same time. So we're looking at different funding opportunities for this.
Well, kudos to whoever had the dream and woke up and said, wait a minute, there's something really cool here. So fantastic.
Mayor Floyd?
Well, I back up a little bit on what Jim said. It's encouraging to see, get out of your box, if you will, a little bit, because it's often, in government, it's easy, quite honestly, easy to do what you're doing and not get sidetracked onto something else. And this is a great idea, obviously, and so I'm going to compliment you on what you've done. And then put some more work on you, is that there's a lot of other places. South DeKalb is certainly one that could generate or could benefit from some sort of connection to Hartsville International Airport from down there, and East Atlanta, West Atlanta, and certainly some of those. So I think this idea is certainly something that, I mean, I think I'd love to see this work like it should work. And
Yes,
anyway,
sir.
my compliments to you on what you've done here.
Yeah, we hope this spirit of collaboration catches on.
If there are no further questions, could we please vote? Motion has passed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, resolution to approve the locally preferred alternative for the Candler Road ART project. Mr. Mengistu, please correct me.
You're right.
Okay. Floor is yours.
Good morning, Chair Blakely, Mr. Greenwood, Ms. Rocha, members of the committee. Today, I'm excited to be here just to request the approval for the recommended locally preferred alternative for Candler ART project. Next slide, please. Just the intent of this project is just to connect the Georgia State University Decatur campus either to Avondale Station or Decatur Station, and include a future stop as a South DeKalb transit hub. And the reason behind this Candler Road is just to provide ART service as we promised on the 15th Amendment, and as like other ART program of MARTA, just to provide fast, frequent, reliable transit service for a high ridership corridor. And it also advances prosperity, connectivity, and equity for the region as well. And the map shows the routes going north to Decatur and Avondale Station. Next slide, please. The history of this project is beginning on back 2019 with the Transit Master Plan recommend ART along Candler Road. And in 2020, MARTA advances to ART Beaufort and Candler, and two transit hubs, Stonecrest and South DeKalb Transit Hub, identified on the DeKalb County Master Plan. And so far, in 2022 and the beginning of 2023, we have engaged extensively on more than 6 public engagements, and we conducted technical analysis to come up with the best recommendation for this ART project. Now we are here, just the MARTA board, to consider the LPA recommendation to advance to a preliminary design to move this project going forward. Next slide, please. We have done extensive public engagement and technical analysis. We started with a public forum last year on October, virtually and in person. Even we did it a virtual meeting last week, and 42 to 45 people already been attended, and our virtual meeting was very productive and very supportive for the recommendation. We have an online survey open between October of last year and February of this year to ask the preference whether it is Decatur or Avondale alternative will be. And we have done a focus group meetings with the public, especially on seniors in the South DeKalb Senior Center on December of last year, and a Candler Civic Society group, which is advocating safety on that corridor in February of this year, and with a MARTA Riders focus group on New Life Church of this year, March. And we have also have a meeting with our bus operators to get information from their feedback, how they are looking at their perspective as well on February. We have done a routing and station location workshop held here in MARTA in September and October of last year, and a technical tour was conducted in Candler Road ART routes at the beginning of this year with the Department of MARTA planning staff. Totally, we have engaged more than 500 total participants, including the last week public engagement with meetings, focus group, and survey as well. Next slide, please. Here is the timeline for this project. We are here on a major decision point just is shown on the yellow chevron of this timeline. Before we reach this point, we have made existing condition and alternative definition during summer and fall of last year. And also, we conducted a detailed alternative evaluation during summer. So we are now here just to select the locally preferred alternative to move this project forward with study, final design, and construction. Next slide, please. Just after we have evaluated and included all the information from our stakeholders, public forum, and technical analysis, we have like 7 evaluation criterias, and we looked at the ridership potential. We are already looking at the speed and reliability for both alternatives, and we have also calculated the cost for the capital cost and operation cost as well for both alternatives. And we include the feedback of the public and the stakeholders that we have done in the past into our decision-making process. And at the same time, we have already integrated our plans in alliance with the MARTA future plan, at the same time with the DeKalb County master plan as well. Equity impact also one component, which include low-income groups, people of color, and senior citizens into our analysis, and economic development. We are also evaluating economic development potential, especially on a mixed corridor focusing on TODs. When we dived into the summary, Decatur Station alternative score a higher in cost category and lower over capital cost and favored by the respondent. However, the Avondale alternative scores higher in all other evaluation categories and deliver higher projected annual ridership, fair revenue, generate fair revenue as compared to the Decatur alternative. In addition, the Avondale alternative provide fast, more reliable trips with less peak hour congestion and more routes, miles, and no grade rail crossing that align with our objective of ART as well. Additionally, the Avondale alternative serves as a higher percentage of vulnerable population, especially for people of color, low income, as well as senior citizens as well. And lastly, Avondale alternative integrate better with MARTA and DeKalb County long-range plans and economic potential. Next slide, please. And the Avondale alternative avoid any conflict with the 2018 Decatur Community Transportation Plan. So the city of Decatur is going to advocate pedestrian and bicycle improvement through the Candler Street corridor. And one additional comment on Avondale Station has existing on-site parking, where Decatur Station has not a parking space available to create a new parking. And it has a future parking structure if expansion of parking option is also necessary. Next slide, please. The recommended LPA and action shown on the map. So MARTA seeks approval of Avondale Station alternative as a locally preferred alternative for Candler ART project. And this selected alignment will include traffic signal priority, and at the same time, the average stop between two stations will be 1/3 of a mile. We have also 47 proposed stations, which has 23 pairs, and one at JSU Panther City campus. And upgraded amenity include stops, including waiting area with distinct AR shelters, seatings, real-time information, and trash receptacle to mention. Next slide, please. So before I concluded my presentation, I'm requesting for the approval of locally preferred alternative for Candler ART project. Thank you.
And thank you for the presentation. Could I get a motion in a second? It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion? Mr. Durrett.
Yes. What is the slide number? The one where you compare the two side by side, slide number 6. You know, I think it would be nice for us to know and the public to know when you see these numerical scores, those are scores at the top, 6.8 and 8.3. Out of what? You know, you look at it, you can see, okay, this one performs better than the other, but when you put a number there, it just begs the question, you know, why isn't it a 10? And then you see something that says 13 compared to 7. Where do those numbers sit on what scale? Just something to consider. I don't need to know the answer right now, but I'm just thinking of, you know, when you're looking at this, it scored 60.6 out of what would be the ideal route, that sort of thing.
Thank you for the comment, Mr. Droit.
No further questions? Let us vote.
Hey, Bill, is 2025 good enough for you? Okay.
Motion passes. Are there any other matters to come before the committee? If none, thank you.
Safety Committee meeting for Thursday, May 25th, 2023. Board members, you have in front of you the minutes of the April 27th Operations and Safety Committee meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? If not, is there a motion for adoption of those minutes? Who's moving that? Okay, that's not me, though. Okay. I'm gonna look over here. Okay, there was a motion and a second. Motion by Jim Durrett, second by somebody else? Okay, all right. No additions or corrections, please vote. Jennifer, second. Okay, and the minutes are adopted. First item on the agenda today is a resolution authorizing the award of a contract for the procurement of ultrasonic testing for MARTA rail system IFB B50102. Addie Matthew, Director of Maintenance of Way. That's a cool title, Maintenance of Way. I like it. Mr. Matthew.
Good morning, Chairman Pond, Vice Chair Floyd, Mr. Greenwood, Mr. Wright, and members of the Operations and Safety Committee. Okay, I can't hear you. My name is Addie Matthew, Director of Maintenance of Way. I'd like to direct your attention to agenda item number 2, which is the resolution authorizing award of a contract for the procurement of ultrasonic testing services for MARTA's running rail IFB B50102. Next slide, please. MARTA owns 104 miles of mainline track and 20 miles of yard track. MARTA conducts visual inspections of our mainline and yard tracks twice weekly. MARTA also conducts ultrasonic inspections of our mainline rails twice each year in accordance with industry best practices. Ultrasonic inspections detect internal rail flaws that are not visible to the naked eye and are a critical part of MARTA's rail inspection program. Next slide, please. The ultrasonic equipment shown in this slide is attached to a vehicle with high rail wheels. The vehicle travels at speed up to 15 miles per hour along the running rail of the track during testing. See the bottom right picture right there? That's the ultrasonic equipment and the vehicle that it's attached to that runs along our right-of-way. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the ultrasonic waves being transmitted into the rail at various angles from a transducer. This is a full track inspection solution that uses high-pitched waves to scan rails and identify internal flaws in need of repair. The data from this testing is transmitted into a computer in the cab of the vehicle, which is observed and interpreted by the engineer. If defects are identified, the rail is replaced prior to failure or breakage, resulting in a safer and more efficient rail system. Ultrasonic testing is an essential portion of our running rail preventive maintenance program. Next slide, please. This slide shows a section of rail with the various parts that are being tested and the type of internal defects. If you look at the picture in front of you, you see the parts of the rail, the head, the web, and the base. Internal defects cannot be seen during our routine track inspections conducted twice weekly. As you can see, the dark color at the center of the rail head is a traverse defect which could not have been detected visually by a track walker. Next slide, please. This slide shows a joint bar that is commonly used to connect two pieces of rail. The second picture shows a crack in the rail where the joint was covered where the crack was covered by the joint bar and could not have been detected visually, but was detected utilizing ultrasonic testing. Again, highlighting the need for this service. And again, if you look at that picture, that's where we have these joint bars along our system. And in rare cases, we do get defects behind those bars that are not visible to the naked eye. And the ultrasonic testing will detect those failures. Next slide, please. This contract consists of 3 base years with 2 option years. The base total is $510,000. The option year is $170,000 per year, with a contract total of $850,000. This procurement will be funded 100% by operating funds with an average annual spend of $170,000. Next slide, please. Notice was sent to 5 vendors with only 3 bids being received. The lowest bid was deemed non-responsible. The second lowest bidder, Emory Smith Laboratories, was determined to be responsive and responsible. DBE participation was set at 0% since there were no DBEs in this industry in the Georgia DBE directory. At this time, I respectfully request the Operations and Safety Committee's approval for a resolution authorizing the general manager or his delegate to enter into a contract with Smith Emory Laboratories for the contract amount of $850,000 for ultrasonic rail testing. Thank you. I turn it back over to you, Mr. Chairman.
Why was the low bidder non-responsive?
Good question. Do we have our contracts, folks, in here? I will have to get that back to you, on that one. Oh, there she goes.
Good morning, Mr. Floyd, Mr. Greenwood, Mr. Wright, and other members of the committee. My name is Jacqueline Holland, Senior Director of Contracts, Procurement, and Materials. The lowest bidder was considered non-responsible, not non-responsive. They were responsive, but they were non-responsible. After we review bids for responsiveness, we send it to D&I. They do a responsibility check for DBE review, and if the firm isn't responding according to maybe the timeline of 5 days, we have to move on to the next bidder. So we have a DBE goal on bids, and the FDA has required that we give them at least 5 days to respond to our requirements, and if we don't receive those requirements within that time frame, we move on to the next low.
Thank you. Any other questions regarding that issue?
Yeah.
Stacy?
So what if they're not DBE? Does that?
So we ask for DBE requirements, whether if it's a goal that's set on that particular bid. If they don't give the D&I department the information, we do move forward, whether if it's a DBE company or not. And then responsibility is also based upon their financial capabilities and things like that. So if they don't meet the financial capabilities of the bid, we have to move on to the next low. So there is certain things that we require the bidder to respond to as far as responsibility.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Matthew, is this the equipment only, and it's our employees that do the testing, or is this the equipment and engineers doing the testing for us?
So yeah, this is a contractor doing it for us. This is not the equipment, this is the service.
Okay.
Sorry, is there any other questions for Mr. Matthew? All right, so let's please vote. And motion carries. The resolution is adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the third item on the agenda today is the resolution authorizing the award of a contract for the procurement of commercial doors and installation, RFP P50202, utilizing the Federal General Services Administration contract. Sean Thomas, Director, Bus Maintenance. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Pond. I just said that. I just said I wasn't going to do that. Good morning, Chairman Floyd, Mr. Greenwood, Mr. Wright, and Operations and Safety Committee members. My name is Sean Thomas, Director of Facilities, and if I may, I would like to bring your attention to agenda item number 3, which is a resolution authorizing award of RFP P50202 And this is for the procurement of commercial door installation services utilizing the General Services Administration Contract Agreement. Next slide, please. The Office of Facilities is seeking to obtain an agreement for door and gate installation services on an as-needed basis. Historically, this has been obtained using individual solicitations based on equipment type. However, this approach will consolidate these purchases into a single contract agreement utilizing the current GSA service agreement with DH Pace. This approach will streamline door and gate purchases and associated installation services for a more quicker, more nimble approach to known security issues throughout the system. Next slide. This agreement will provide equipment, hardware, and labor necessary for installation of equipment specified in the GSA price catalog. The applicable labor rates have been negotiated as part of the reference catalog. This agreement will be separate from station rehabilitation initiatives where there are design and other changes to our facilities. Next slide. As an overview, this list of equipment is representative of the type of products currently utilized by MARTA and available under this GSA agreement. This will be utilized on an as-needed basis to replace equipment which is beyond its useful life or otherwise deemed inoperable, or again, creating security issues. Next slide. The Office of Facilities anticipates a maximum annual spend of $400K, which has been established as the annual amount for the base term and subsequent option terms, for a total amount of $2 million for the 5-year term of one base and 4 one-year options. No DBE goal was assigned to this agreement considering the utilization of the GSA agreement, and any renewals of subsequent option terms will be in accordance with the GSA price schedule. Next slide. With this in mind, I respectfully request authorization of the Operations and Safety Committee to award RFP 50202 to DH Pace Incorporated for an amount not to exceed $2 million. Thank you. Back over to you, Chair.
There is. Is there a second? There is. Any questions concerning this issue? Rod?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. So this agreement is for labor and materials, is that right?
Yes, sir. Labor, equipment, and materials.
All right, so we have no control of what the materials may be used in all of this. So is it, I mean, I know you said you negotiated the labor rate, but the material cost is not in this. And so is that correct? So that means that it could be substantial part of this cost.
So as part of the existing GSA agreement, they have a price schedule which lists all of the different types of equipment that falls up under,
Okay.
and it includes a lot of the items that would be required for not only the products but also for the installation.
Okay, so we do have some control over the material cost of these projects.
Yes, they have a price catalog where they have the different types of equipment that's included as part of the agreement.
And the reason I asked the question, because once again, if you're doing this type of work, you don't know what the materials are going to cost. I mean, it may cost this amount, and if it's all one expense for all this for $400,000 a year, it could exceed that. But
Well, yes, sir. So and you're referring to basically the cost of the equipment escalating over the years.
Yeah, just how do you control that within this contract? And I guess that's one of the questions that I had that just concerned about. So, but if you address that, like you said, through catalogs, then I guess that's the way you're going to do it. But is something that I think it just has to be aware of when it comes to these types of equipments. But anyway, that was my question on that.
Sean, can I ask you to just opine on this, the question put differently? If, you know, if we're going through the Georgia State contract and there's a catalog of all the different arms and pieces of equipment and hardware with prices already laid out, and it was kind of arranged under a, you know, a larger group purchase, if you will, does that make it, I saw on your earlier slide, you said it, anyway, it makes it easier to deal with it. Does that make it easier? I think Rod is asking that question. Are we going to have to negotiate every time, or is this already, the negotiation's already done? We're just simply picking from a catalog now and makes it some. Do you think that that'll make your job easier?
I definitely think that this approach will make our job easier with being more nimble and be able to respond as these type of issues come up. I do understand the question because the price catalog has already been established with the vendor for the equipment and for the labor. But of course, as we've seen over the past couple of years, there are often times where vendors, especially with the market changing, where some of the prices have continued to escalate over the past couple of years. Yeah. One of the things, and I referenced it in the last slide, was because there are opportunities for the vendor to renegotiate some of those unit prices, and of course, we would be piggybacking off of that agreement, but our approach for this is to have a not to exceed amount.
Okay.
So we wouldn't be able to exceed the amount based off of what our agreement is and what's authorized by this committee.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's what I needed. Thank you, Collie. Yep. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, would you please vote? And the resolution is adopted. Thank you.
Thank you.
The fourth item on the agenda this morning is the resolution authorizing the award of a contract for the procurement of bus fasteners, IFB B50207. Charles Chafin, Director of Bus Maintenance.
Thank you, sir. So good morning, Chairman Floyd, Mr. Greenwood, Mr. Wright, and members of the Operations and Safety Committee. My name is Charles Chafin. I'm the Director of Bus Maintenance. I'm here to present agenda item number 4, the resolution authorizing the award of a contract for the procurement of bus fasteners, IFB B50207. Next slide, please. This contract includes all types of fasteners and wiring wiring devices and wire for all of our revenue and non-revenue vehicles. It also includes product vending machines, which I will speak to on a later slide. It will include all of our locations, including the Brady non-revenue location for our non-revenue vehicles. And this also includes a contractor replenishment of stock when it reaches the minimum levels. Next slide, please. As part of our control procedures, MARTA will be the one establishing the checks and balances for the appropriate stock levels to ensure that we're not getting more stock than needed and we're not carrying more product than needed. The engineers will be taking over on minimum and maximum stock values. Any kind of variations that are requested from the shops and so forth will have to go through engineering and writing so that we can control that nothing's being added without our say-so and without our control. And the contractor shall only restock based on these values that we have presented. Next slide, please. Something new that we are adding with this contract, it's actually new to MARTA, is the vending machines. So this is a way for us to potentially save cost, look at any kind of waste items because shop supplies of this kind can become waste. I've seen good results with this in other areas, done a lot of research. It does a cloud-based usage report, so we can actually see what individual is checking out what. We can actually put minimums and maximums on what they're allowed to get out of the vending machines monthly based on their job title. gives us a better accountability. It allows the machines to be closer to the work areas to save on time walking back and forth and be more productive. And then this contract also includes the maintaining of the machines by the contractor. Next slide, please. The contract term is for 3 years for a base with 2 one-year options. There's 3 total bids received, with Worth USA Inc. being the lowest bid and being found responsible and responsive. The price is determined to be fair and reasonable. There was an 8% DBE goal. Worth USA did make a commitment of no less than 6%, so it can go higher, but a good faith effort of no less than 6% was met. Next slide, please. The Office of Bus Maintenance respectfully requests authorization for a resolution to enter into a contract with Worth USA Inc. not to exceed the amount of $2,909,379. And this contract will be funded 100% from local operating funds from the approved fiscal year budgets. Next slide, please. Thank you, and I now turn it back over to you, Chairman Floyd, for consideration.
Thank you. Is there a motion for adoption of this resolution? There is. There's a second. Questions concerning this issue? No? No questions? Just a brief clarification, if you will. This is based on a per price basis of what we use, is that, or what we buy? Is that right?
Correct. So we'll be setting minimum and maximum values of a certain size M12 bolt, metric bolt. We'll set a value of 100 if that's what comes in a box, so like a 1 box value, and we're paying for that price of 100. So it is based on usage. We're not doing it on consignment.
So when they fill these machines up, we pay for whatever they put in the machine.
Correct.
And then we use it, it gets to a certain point, the machine tells us it's low, and they send some more stuff out, and we pay for that.
Correct.
So
And then that's how we're trying to control it this time, is ensure that we're the ones controlling the minimum maximums. We're not letting the contractor determine we need 300 when we know we only need 100. So we're going to be the ones controlling what gets put in those machines based on our values.
But the actual amount of this contract is based on what we buy. Is that right?
Correct.
Not, it's not a lump sum amount that we're not going to spend anymore. We could spend more or less than what that amount is.
You're correct, but with the vending machines, I'm believing that we're going to be actually quite a bit under this. That's the whole point of them, is to show a savings here and show a value added to MARTA with doing the vending machines.
All right. Thank you. I'm sorry. Any other, Frida?
Mr. Floyd, I was just going to mention, we instituted this concept in hospitals many years ago, and it's the same. It may not be nuts and bolts, it may be at syringes and needles, but it works. It holds people accountable. You know where to charge it to, what account it goes to, and if things are missing, you can pretty quickly find out where they are. So I highly recommend this.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And we are PPE gear, light latex, and nitrile gloves will be in this as well. So, you know, those are a high usage item that we could control on that, so forth, brake cleaner and stuff. It's not just nuts and bolts. So exactly what she said, that it's been adopted in other places, and we're going to make good use of this.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, please vote.
Thank you.
Michael Pollinis, Manager of Security and Emergency Management. Michael?
Yes, good morning, Chairman Floyd, Mr. Greenwood, Mr. Wright, and members of the Operations and Safety Committee. My name is Mike Pollinis. I am the Emergency Preparedness Unit Manager with MARTA Police Department. Please direct your attention to agenda item number 5. This is a briefing on the results of the 2023 MARTA Police full-scale exercise. Next slide, please. So this exercise was held on Saturday, May 6th, started at roughly 6 p.m. up until the wee morning hours of Sunday, May 7th, around 3 a.m. The exercise was titled Operation Resolve, and this came out of the 2022 tabletop exercise that we held at the Georgia World Congress Center. As you see on the screen here, the mission area that we focused on was on response. In the emergency management field of study, there's 5 pillars or 5 mission areas, which include prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. Department of Homeland Security and FEMA has 32 core capabilities. Takeaway from our tabletop at the World Congress Center in November were the 5 core capabilities that you see on the screen here. That was our focal point during this full-scale exercise. And in the next slide, we'll kind of go through each one of them: logistics and resource management, operation, communication and coordination, as well as on-scene security, protection, and public information and warning. Next slide, please. So we wanted to really evaluate the capabilities to establish lines of communication, allocate resources, and maintain a common operating picture between first responders. That's a primary focal point of the Police Emergency Operations Center. We also evaluated the use of existing MARTA plans, policies, and procedures while integrating all necessary MARTA departments and external partners in a response to a potentially terrorism-related incident. We evaluated the capability to ensure security of the MARTA right-of-way, public, and responders within the affected areas. We evaluated the capability to share and disseminate internal warnings and emergency public information. And last but not least, we wanted to evaluate our capabilities with situational awareness and assessment. Next slide, please. So on the screen here, you see a number of the threat or hazard scenarios that we exercised. I should say that this exercise was pretty dynamic and complex. It started off with a hostage being taken on a bus. That was really fun and really cool to see them engage with, our officers engage with not only the hostage negotiator, but also the bus driver, and use their de-escalation techniques as well as conflict resolution techniques throughout that exercise. We then cascaded into a number of protesters inside of the station on the concourse. These are your environmental protesters who were upset over the recent efforts to clear trees out the right-of-way. And last but not least, we concluded with a scenario where we had to evacuate the rail car, which was partially located inside of the tunnel. We also added, for complexity, an IED scenario, explosive scenario in the station where our SORT EOD teams had to respond to both simultaneously. So as I said, pretty complex, pretty dynamic. Incident Command really was managing all of these incidents throughout the night, and we wanted to test that capability. On the next slide, I do have a 1.5 minute, 40-second video clip from local news to kind of give you all a visual of the events of that night. Next slide.
Yeah, that's right. 3 years ago, in fact, was the last time that they did this type of full-scale training, so it was long overdue at this point. Now, it was really eye-opening to watch all of these real-life scenarios kind of enacted with all these actors, and a protest was one of those things that we saw. Now, train services was halted while all of this protesting simulation was going on. The training gave MARTA police and staff an opportunity to make sure that they're prepared for an emergency situation. Now, MARTA police are often at the center of large events and protests, just like in the spring of 2020. Today, there was a simulation that got out of hand, and there also was a hostage negotiation happening upstairs, one level above the protest.
It was a good scenario to help our officers see how they could figure out how to get those suspects off the bus while minimizing harm to the passengers. So we want to make sure that we're using our conflict resolution skills, using our de-escalation skills.
Now, these training exercises are pretty important. In fact, the Department of Homeland Security, as well as the Transit Authority, they require departments like MARTA to conduct these big training exercises to make sure that they are prepared for any and everything. Now, stay with us. In the next half hour, you're going to hear from one of these actors who participated in this exercise. We're live in downtown Atlanta. Bridget Spencer, Atlanta News First.
Yeah, really interesting to see that up close. MARTA police were out in force for a full-scale exercise.
Thanks, Michael.
All right. I think that's enough of the news for one day. Going on to this slide, we had a number of observers participate in the exercise from each level of government, including the private sector, members from TSA, FEMA, Georgia Emergency Management Agency, GDOT. We did have the University of Georgia Institute for Disaster Management on hand as well, State Farm Marina, Gwinnett County Emergency Management, Atlanta Fire, Georgia World Congress Center, as well as our internal representatives from MARTA, Safety, Bus, Real Estate, and Rail as well. Next slide, please. And the next few slides, these organizations, if you will, help in the planning process. Some participated as well, but we do want to acknowledge their efforts. Again, TSA from the federal level and FEMA, stateside, Georgia Emergency Management, Homeland Security Agency, GDOT. Next slide, please. And our Atlanta regional partners, our UASI members, APD, Atlanta Police Department, Atlanta Fire Rescue, Grady, and State Farm, Mercedes-Benz, and Georgia World Congress Center, as this was on their campus footprint. Next slide. Our internal departments, definitely want to take time out to thank them. It was a large feat to coordinate this. Our bus department, we want to really thank them for helping out and assisting with the bus bridges and communicating that throughout the authority. Safety department helped us out with our safety plan during the exercise, as well as all the logistics that came with gathering cones for the streets and wearing safety vests and doing the safety briefing. So they helped us out a great deal. External Affairs, want to really acknowledge them for their role in coordinating with the media beforehand and on the scene and after the event as well. Maintenance Away and Rail played a huge role in de-energizing the power, single track, and working around all these TR4 projects we had at once. So I really appreciate that. And last but not least, Facilities and Vertical Transportation assisted with station cleaning, overall maintenance of the dome station, portable restrooms, and maintaining the escalators and elevators. I do want to take a few seconds to acknowledge my team as well, the Emergency Preparedness Units, Tommy King, D'Angelo Bryant, as well as Kyra Ford, and MPD Leadership, Deputy Chief McKenzie, who's here, Chief Crayer, and Chief Davenport as well, and Major Salters. Next slide. MPD consultant firm Tetra Tech played a role as the evaluators for this exercise. Tetra Tech is in the process of developing the After Action Report. The After Action Report will outline the strengths and areas for improvement identified during the full-scale exercise. MARTA will conduct an after-action meeting for the MARTA key personnel. The after-action meeting is a forum for key personnel to hear the results of the evaluation analysis, validate those findings and recommendations in the draft after-action report. And from there, we'll begin developing a process improvement plan. Next slide. I turn this back over to you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In the video, she said it's long overdue. Is it really long overdue?
I'll put an asterisk near that, sir. We haven't had a full-scale exercise in 3 years due to the COVID pandemic. Now, in the interim, we have had several tabletop exercises to keep that continuity going.
So is 3 years too long a time to have this? Regardless of the reason why it's that way.
I would say yes if you're not continuing with tabletops and drills and so forth, which we've been doing.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Or you avoided that question very well.
No, I will say, we, best case scenario, we would do this annually, and that, you know, that's been MARTA's intent, and as Michael said, with the pandemic, we had to take, you know, safety precautions, but yeah, these kinds of things, when they happen in real life, they unfold so quickly that, you know, practicing it once a year is not excessive.
Okay. Thank you. And I just add that if you do this during daylight hours, you might get a little more attention from some of us board members rather than 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm more likely to show up at 1 o'clock than I am in the afternoon rather than 1 o'clock at night. But anyway, just a thing.
Yes,
you know,
Mr. Chair.
Anyway, thank you. I want to close with, back on 9/11, when that happened, if you remember right, and I'll tell you this story, that when the plane went into the Pentagon, the first people on were the fire department, Washington Fire Department, and there was a lady fire chief that had a piece of paper, and on it she had everybody that needed to be involved in this, and it's a handwritten document. If you haven't seen it, you really ought to look at it, because there's a manual now about what you guys go through. It's about this thick, and it's based on that piece of paper from that woman fire chief, and what she put together and who all needed to be contacted. That's why it's good for me to see when you do this, that you have other people involved in it around you, other departments, other people, and how important it is, that communication. And I know we do a lot better job communicating between agencies now than we did in 2001. I know we do that, but that piece of paper, if you haven't seen it, it's really kind of an emotional comments by her and stuff in there. So about and the fact that she showed up there and did that, and that book is based on what she did on that piece of paper that day. So anyway, 2 other matters. Thank you very much. Letter of intent to utilize the GSA contract for the procurement of office furniture, informational only. That has to do with moving some people over into the other building and buying furniture for them. And the March performance indicators had to do with bus operations is for your information there. Is anything remaining to come before this board? If not, we are adjourned.
To call to order the May 25th, 2023 meeting of the External Relations Committee. First on the agenda, may I have approval of the March 30th, 2023 External Relations Committee meeting minutes? It has been properly moved and second. Let us vote.
Madam Chair, I thought F5 fixes everything.
That's F5. That fixes it.
Can you please mark me in the affirmative? Okay.
The motion has passed. At this time, we'll have a briefing for the fiscal year 23 third quarter advertising and sales revenue. Kevin Hackshaw, Manager, Business Development Sales. Mr. Hackshaw.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Scott, Mr. Greenwood, Ms. Mullinax, and members of the board. I am Kevin Hackshaw, Manager of Business Development and Sales, and I will present a briefing on MARTA's advertising and sales revenue for Q3 in fiscal year 23. Next slide, please. As of April 2023, our fiscal year-to-date total is $13.3 million, and that includes April as well. The green column on the far right has our fiscal 23 numbers, with $6.1 million coming from advertising and $7.2 million from our sales programs. Sales programs encompass partnership, UPass, K-12, and conferences. Using our benchmarks of fiscal year 20, 21, and 22, with 20 being our pre-COVID numbers, so we use that as our reference to where we were before COVID as to where we are now coming out of COVID. You'll see that we should surpass the totals of fiscal year 21 and 22 at 10.9 and 14.8 million respectively, but we are still far below the 25.7 million that we saw in fiscal year 20. Next slide, please. Taking a closer look at this quarter, when we look at the quarter, we are at about 3.76 million, with 1.38 million from advertising and 2.37 million from sales. Again, compared to previous quarter 3 performance, we are slightly under fiscal year 22's 3.8 million and just above fiscal year 21's 2.72 million. This dip is in large part due to some softness in ad sales for the year of 2023. And again, compared to pre-COVID numbers of fiscal year 20, we're down by more than half. Next slide, please. At this point, we take a bit of a deeper dive into our advertising revenue broken out from sales revenue, so we look at both individually. Next slide, please, and this is fiscal year 23 advertising revenue. So we have 4 primary sources of ad revenue. First one is transit, and that's bus, rail, and alcohol advertising, streetcar, digital, and bus shelters. All of these gave us a total of 1.38 million for quarter 3. Again, we're looking at the green column on the far right. Again, we're down from fiscal year 22, but slightly better than fiscal year 21. And a couple of items to note on this slide. First of all, transit streetcar is 0 due to a lack of sales for a large part of fiscal year 23 due to a softness in the market, as well as streetcars were out of service for 4 months as well. We do expect that to change going into fiscal 24. Digital was also 0 because our digital signage, which was part of a pilot, were removed after the pilot phase ended in January 2022. Next slide, please.
Excuse me, could you go back? Thank you.
Sure.
When you look at that transit line, I feel like I'm at Sesame Street. One of these things is not like the others. What does alcohol mean?
I had that exact question.
Good question. We break out alcohol sales separately. So when we get into, if we did like a full breakdown for all of the revenue, you'll see what we get revenue-wise from bus, what we get from rail, and then alcohol sales are broken out separately into both of those.
Are we selling alcohol?
Well, we do some alcohol ads, yes.
It's the kind of ad.
Oh, okay.
So, but why we don't do accident attorneys as a separate one,
I can tell you, well, when we look at when we look at personal injury attorneys, that works out to roughly about 30% of our revenue. Were there any more questions on that slide, or? All right. Next slide, please. All right, so a couple of takeaways from the advertising program performance. First off, we had a soft employment market, particularly in Atlanta. It was really along tech companies stopping hiring. And so in 2023, that led to companies pulling back on marketing and ad purchases. However, our ad partners are bullish on a solid resurgence in 2024, so they do expect us to rebound. And that is in no small part to it being an election year. And typically in election years, we do see an uptick in our advertising sales, not necessarily for specific candidates, but just in general. The market just responds well to more eyes on for political years. Also, digital ad signage rollout has begun finally with the GWCC video wall going live in March. That's, if you look at the large picture with the Falcons ad, that's actually live now in GWCC, so you should see ads on that now. And phase one of our rollout, about 91 signs of our 200 plus that are going to go live within the next 2 years, that's going to begin in quarter one of fiscal year 2024. So we should see those signs going in around August of this year. Next slide, please. All right, next we'll take a look at our sales revenue. Next slide, please. All right, sales revenues show a bit of a different story to the ad numbers, as we do see steady growth in all of our programs overall. Our UPass, K through 12, and group sales programs continue to grow as K through 12 and colleges see more on-campus learning taking place and conventions start getting back into full swing. Our Transportation Management Association partners, so that's TMA, they continue to struggle, and that 574K number, I know you do see it declining from 20 to 21 through 22. It does reflect in part the departure of Central Atlanta Progress and Midtown TMAs from the partnership program in June and August of 2022. Now, on the flip side, direct partnership, which is MARTA selling directly to organizations, that continues to see significant growth because some of the companies that have left the TMA programs have come over to MARTA Direct. It's not a one-to-one correlation, but we have seen a number of companies come over. Now, some of those companies have come over, and also importantly, service industries continue to hire heavily in 2023. So we're seeing a lot of those companies coming out and buying directly from MARTA. Next slide, please. Oh, go ahead. Question?
Can you help me understand why Midtown Alliance and Central Atlanta Progress pulled out of the TMA program?
Part of it is they started looking, so the TMAs in general sell MARTA Fare, and they sell MARTA Fare at a discount. It helps them get a foot in the door with their customers to sell not just MARTA Fare, but all forms of mitigation for cars on the road. Part of it is the administration. They are scaling down in some cases, so they didn't have the dedicated workforce to maintain doing the program. And in some cases, they weren't seeing, because TMAs really specifically focus on certain customers that have the option of work from home and hybrid work schedules, they saw that shrink really, really drastically in the number of tickets that they were selling, and they just wanted to use their resources otherwise than trying to sell MARTA.
Thank you.
Sure, no problem. Next slide, please. So a couple of takeaways from here as well. Rule of thumb is as ridership grows, our sales programs grow. And so challenges will still exist because just what we were talking about, the availability of work from home and hybrid options, we still find a number of potential riders not using MARTA like they used to, and we're not sure they're coming back in large part. On the flip side, again, service industries are hiring a lot, and they are using MARTA as a benefit for their employees to get them to and from work. The other piece of this is we look at Breeze Mobile as helping to push some of our sales programs in fiscal 24. We think that the integration of Breeze Mobile, specifically the future ability for TMA and direct program customers to self-register, should help in driving businesses to our programs because of the lessened admin load for them. In addition, when we move from physical media to using your phone, it really does help for our UPass customers because I don't know a college-age student that doesn't have a phone attached to their hand, and convention business to use MARTA as well. So we're really excited about integrating that further into our programs in fiscal 24. Next slide, please. And with that, I open the floor to any questions.
You may have had all the questions before we got to the question period.
It works for me.
Mr. Worthy, I see your light is still on.
Yeah, I had a quick question about, I remember I think you answered it, but let me make sure my understanding is correct. I remember it became a bit of a battle almost. I mean, I know we went to court over it, but the switch from out front to intersection, and intersection promised all these very newfangled, digital, easy to replace, easy to change, et cetera, et cetera. And that made me really excited. You said that rollout starts in Q1 of 24, and I think that's what I'm referring to. Mm-hmm. But I'm guessing that the bulk of that ad revenue really won't be realized until we have the new train cars to put the newfangled advertising in. Is that kind of correct?
Kind of.
Okay.
So with the 200 signs, we do expect to see a drastic difference because advertisers are drawn to digital versus static signage. Regardless of if it's large format or smaller ads, digital just rules. So when we see all of those 200, it should be about 240 signs or so throughout all 38 stations. We should see a drastic increase in that revenue, as well as for the trains, because everything in the trains in terms of advertising and informational signage will all be digital. So we do expect to see a jump there as well. Sure.
Mr. Floyd.
Well, just a question or comment. And you made the statement that we don't know when the riders are coming back, and I agree with that 100%. We don't know when or if some of these riders are ever coming back. It would seem to me that our advertising ought to focus on people not riding the train. And that's the use of our assets that people that are in cars or walking or otherwise would see that might be attractive and outside of a station. But I'm thinking primarily of these overpasses over, you know, in Decatur there are two of them, okay? One goes into the city of Atlanta, one goes into Avondale Estates, but there's certainly a place there for some sort of digital advertising, just like you see on the road, that, I mean, the people coming down there through there that never going to get on a train would see and might respond to. I would just encourage you to think about those kinds of things, because if we really want to see advertising and this to increase, revenues to increase, I think we've got to figure out how to use what we've got that people that don't get on a train are going to be able to see.
Yep. And that's a good point, and one that we have looked at. The issue that we have with, for example, putting on an overpass is we tend to run afoul of GDOT, and depending on the jurisdiction that that's going in, there are specific and very strict rules over putting not just advertising, but digital advertising, which may have moving images in it. And so it becomes less of an advertising issue than a legal issue and a regulatory issue for us to work through. But it is something that we have been looking at for a while now.
Creates a few accidents, shouldn't matter to us, you know, that's.
Well, it's a few accidents. I mean,
We're also looking at using our rolling stock for self-promotion as well. So things like on the side of a bus that says, you know, this bus, you know, replaces up to 27 vehicles, you're welcome. And that's just a message to the motorists on the road that, so that they can start to support transit even if they're not getting on it. Things like that.
yeah, I think actually the electric buses, and I've heard from multiple people that it's very eye-catching, that zipper effect. You know, people see it and they notice it and they ask us about it in terms of, oh, we didn't even know there were electric buses until I saw that ad roll by. So you're absolutely right, you know.
Thank you.
All
Any
right.
other questions for Mr. Hackshaw? Hearing none, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
At this time, we will receive a briefing regarding the results of the public hearing of fiscal year 2024 operating and capital budget by Ms. Toni Thornton, Senior Community Outreach Planner. Good afternoon, Ms. Thornton.
Good afternoon, Chair Scott, Mr. Greenwood, and members of the board. Again, I'm Toni Thornton, Senior Public Engagement Officer, and I will present a briefing of the public hearing results for the proposed operating and capital budget for fiscal year 2024. Next slide, please. In collaboration with the Finance Department, External Affairs hosted 2 public hearings to provide customers and stakeholders information about the proposed FY24 budget. To ensure there was an opportunity for individuals to review the proposed budget and provide feedback, we held an in-person meeting and a hybrid, which was live streamed. And various tactics were used to properly notify the public of the budget hearings, which I'll go into more detail in later slides. Next slide, please. The in-person meeting was May 16th in DeKalb County at the Decatur Branch Library, and the hybrid was May 18th in the city of Atlanta at MARTA headquarters. Each meeting included a community exchange session beginning 1 hour earlier to provide people an opportunity to review and ask questions about the proposed budget. Next slide, please. Various outreach tactics were used to reach the public and our customers, which included a combination of street signs and A-frames that were placed at high traffic areas in and around MARTA stations, the Decatur Library, and MARTA headquarters. Emails were sent to our stakeholders and jurisdictional partners who were asked to share the information with their networks and social media pages. Next. I'm continuing. In addition to the meeting flyer, a summary of the proposed budget and a link to the operations and capital budget books were placed on the MARTA website, as well as hard copies placed at the MARTA headquarters security desk. Social media messages were posted on MARTA's Twitter, Facebook, Nextdoor pages, and a press release was issued as well. Next slide, please. Further, we distributed 5,300 flyers at key locations such as government offices, senior centers, and the Fulton Atlanta, Clayton, and DeKalb library systems. As mentioned, 26 A-frames and 18 street signs were placed throughout MARTA stations. Lastly, 6,500 bus hangers went to Laredo, Perry, and Hamilton garages, where they were placed on buses across the system. Next slide, please. Our legal ad was published in the AJC May 4th and May 11th, along with other local circulators such as the Champion newspaper, Mundo Hispanico, Clayton News, Atlanta Voice, the South Fulton Neighbor, and the Northside Neighbor. And to meet our Title VI requirements, all collateral, including the legal ad, street signage, A-frames, bus hangers, and flyers were printed in Spanish as well. Also, a statement was included at the bottom of all promotional materials to request another language or in an accessible format if needed. And as you see the flyer there, that's our Spanish version of the flyer, the community-friendly, what we call community-friendly flyer. Next slide. Our digital outreach is typically pretty effective. The May 18th hybrid hearing was live streamed on YouTube, which had 106 views, and 44 watched the virtual hearing on the day of. And looking at the social media impacts, on Twitter, there were 2,061 impressions, 5 likes, and 6 retweets. Facebook had 666 impressions, 6 likes, and 25 clicking on the link. On Nextdoor, there were close to 25,000 impressions with 22 interactions of the post. And nearly 6,000 emails were sent to a targeted stakeholder list to share with their network. Next slide, please. On May 16th, in-person meeting, 11 attended and 4 made comments. The May 18th hybrid meeting, there were 9 in-person attendees, 44 watching on YouTube, 3 on Zoom, and 3 individuals made comments in person. Next slide. And I believe Mr. Patterson touched on the outcome on some of these in terms of the number of people that attended, as well as the comments and concerns that were expressed. And some of those concerns included the lack of transparency of the proposed budget, a concern that local jurisdictions did not receive copies of the budget. One expressed doubt that all information that was shared with the public was not in the budget. Budget documents need to be in large print for the visually impaired. Would like to have budget documents available to take home. There was concern about the lack of advertising, suggested that MARTA consider more commercials, or they would like to see more commercials around regarding public hearings. And concerns were expressed about bus service, not enough buses on the routes, losing routes, and the lack of seating for older adults and individuals with disabilities. The routes that were mentioned specifically were Route 3, Route 75, Route 114, and Route 809, which that information was shared with our planning and scheduling department so that they can look at those concerns as they consider proposed changes in the going forward, as well as the bus network redesign program that is forthcoming. Next slide, please. Pending board approval, the FY24 operations and capital budget will go into effect July 1st, 2023. And our jurisdictional partners, stakeholders, and customers will be notified using similar tactics such as a press release, social media post, and email blast. Next slide. With that, if you have any questions, I'm open to questions.
No questions? No questions? Oh, my. I have one. Did I hear you list community papers that the meetings were advertised in?
Yes.
I did not hear one in DeKalb. Did I miss it?
I'm sure I may have missed it because I'm sure we advertised in DeKalb. Yes, it would be the DeKalb neighbor because we send it to all the neighbor circulators, the South, the North, and DeKalb and Clayton circulators. Yes.
I missed that one. Any other questions? Hearing none, I'm so sorry, Ms. Thornton, there are no other questions.
Well, thank you all and have a safe and a very nice Memorial Day weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other matters to come before the External Relations Committee? Hearing none, we stand adjourned.